Well now, let me tell you, this is a story that's just gonna tug at your heartstrings. It's one of those tales that starts out like a gentle summer breeze and turns into a full-blown thunderstorm before the sun finally peeks back through the clouds. Where do I even begin? I suppose I should start by saying hello to all of you lovely folks listening today. I truly appreciate you spending your time with me. I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? Go ahead and drop that in the comments, won't you? And if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button too. It's completely free, and it really does help us keep bringing you more stories like this one. Now, let's settle in, maybe grab a warm cup of tea and a blanket, because we need to talk about poor Martha. Bless her heart. That woman has been through the ringer, hasn't she? I can still remember the day her own son and daughter-in-law turned on her like that. It wasn't a sudden explosion, no. It was a slow, agonizing erosion of respect. Like water wearing down a stone until there's nothing left but dust. To understand how we got to that awful birthday party, you have to understand the kind of woman Martha is. She was the cornerstone of her community. She's the one who brings a casserole before you even know you're sick. When her husband, George, passed away 10 years ago, Martha found herself in a quiet house with a decent life insurance policy and a heart that didn't know where to put all its extra love. So, she put it all into David. David was her golden boy. Growing up, he was the star of the track team, the boy with the easy smile. But Martha, in her infinite kindness, might have smoothed over too many of his bumps. When he forgot his homework, she drove it to school. When he dented the car, she paid for the repairs and told George it was a hit and run. She thought she was being supportive, but she was accidentally teaching him that the world would always provide a safety net, no matter how reckless he was. Then came Jessica. Now, I'm not one to gossip. Well, maybe just a little. But from the moment Jessica stepped into the picture, the air changed. She was polished, yes, but she was cold. She looked at Martha's cozy, lace doily-covered home like it was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. She had vision, she said. She wanted David to be a mogul, a titan of industry. And David, bless him, wanted to be whatever Jessica told him to be. They moved into that big, flashy house in the suburbs, the kind with the 2-story foyer and the white carpets that look like they've never seen a speck of dust. But honey, big and flashy costs money. A lot of it. And David's career in consulting, which Martha never quite understood, seemed to involve more golf and expensive lunches than actual work. I can still see Martha sitting at her small kitchen table, the one with the chipped yellow paint and the view of her garden, squinting at David's utility bills. It started so small. $100 here because the AC check bounced. A grocery run there because Jessica's sister is visiting and we want to impress her. Martha felt honored to be needed. She felt like she was still the center of David's world. But a bit turned into always, and small turned into staggering. She started dipping into her retirement savings. She told herself it was an investment in David's future. She was doing everything she could to help her family out, paying their mortgage installments, while her own roof developed a leak she couldn't afford to fix. She was putting organic, grass-fed steak on their table while she was eating canned soup and toast. She thought she was the glue holding their lives together. But oh, those two, David and Jessica, they didn't see a mother's sacrifice. They didn't see the way her hands shook when she looked at her bank balance. They just took advantage of her kindness, didn't they? They treated her like she was nothing more than an ATM with a pulse. The tension started to simmer about a year ago. It was like a low-frequency hum in the background of every interaction. Martha was starting to run low on her own savings. She'd mention it gently, over Sunday dinners she usually paid for, and often cooked herself at their house because Jessica was too busy with the charity board. Martha would say, David, dear, I'm worried. My property taxes went up, and I'm not sure I can cover the landscaping bill for your place this month. Jessica would just sigh, a long, dramatic sound that made Martha feel like a nuisance. She'd roll her eyes and ask David if there was any more of that expensive Pinot Noir. The air in the room would get thick, heavy, with the things they weren't saying. David wouldn't look his mother in the eye. He'd just stare at his phone, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. You could feel it, couldn't you? That tightening in the chest, knowing that a breaking point was coming. Martha started noticing things. David looked haggard. He was losing weight, and his eyes were bloodshot. Jessica was wearing new jewelry, diamonds that looked like they cost more than Martha's car, but the mail on their counter was full of pink envelopes, collection notices. Martha tried to ask, but David would snap at her. You wouldn't understand the pressures of high finance, Mom. Just stay in your lane. Imagine that. Telling the woman who changed your diapers and taught you how to read to stay in her lane. The pressure kept building. David's calls became more frequent and more desperate. Mum, I need $5,000 by Tuesday, or we lose the car. Just this once, I promise. And Martha, trapped by her own love, would move more money. She was drowning, and they were the ones holding her head underwater, all while smiling for their Instagram photos. And oh, did it come to a head. It happened at David's 40th birthday party. Jessica had insisted on a catered affair. She invited everyone who was anyone in their social circle. Martha, despite having less than $1,000 left in her savings, had fronted the $3,000 deposit for the caterers because Jessica claimed their liquidity was tied up in offshore accounts. Martha arrived early, wearing her best floral dress, the one she'd mended 3 times because she couldn't justify buying a new one. She brought a handmade quilt she'd spent 6 months stitching. Every square was a piece of family history, a bit of David's baby blanket, a scrap of George's favourite flannel shirt, pieces of the curtains from David's first bedroom. It was a labour of love for her little boy. The house was packed. It was like a scene from a movie. Glittering lights, a jazz trio in the corner, and people who looked like they'd never worked a day in their lives. Martha felt like a sparrow in a flock of peacocks. She tried to make conversation, but people just looked through her. She was just the mother, the invisible woman who paid the bills. When it came time for gifts, Jessica stood in the center of the room, holding court. She was glowing in a dress that probably cost as much as Martha's kitchen remodel. She opened gifts from David's associates, designer watches, keys to a new jet ski parked in the driveway, and envelopes full of cash. Then came Martha's turn. With trembling hands, she handed David the quilt. She was so proud. She thought, this will remind him of who he is. This will bring him back to us. Jessica didn't even let him unfold it. She took one look at the faded fabric and laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh, but a sharp, jagged sound that cut through the music. "Oh, Martha," she chirped, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "It's so rustic. It smells like... what is that? Mothballs and old memories?" A few of the guests chuckled. Martha's heart skipped a beat. She looked at David, waiting for him to say something, to say, "Hey, that's my mother," or "Thank you, Mom. I know how hard you worked on this." But David... he looked at his wife, then at his friends, and then he let out a snort. He actually laughed. "Yeah, Mom, maybe keep the arts and crafts for the church bake sale next time, huh? We're trying to have a sophisticated party here." He tossed the quilt onto a side chair like it was a dirty rag. "Honey, I'll tell you what. If that had been my son, he wouldn't have been laughing for long, let me tell you." My blood boils just retelling it." Martha stood there, her face turning a deep, painful crimson. She looked around that room at the sophisticated people, the expensive wine she'd paid for, and the son she didn't recognize. Martha didn't cry. Not then. She just set her glass down, walked out of that house, and drove home in the dark. The silence in her car was heavier than any noise. She sat in her driveway for an hour, just staring at her darkened house. That was the night the old Martha stayed behind in that driveway. A new Martha was waking up. She realized that her help wasn't helping at all. It was enabling a monster. But she also realized something else. Something didn't add up. If David was so successful and sophisticated, why did he need her social security check to pay his gardener? Why were there collection notices? Now, I know we've all got family that can drive us crazy, but Martha knew deep down that this was more than just being spoiled. This was a sickness. So she did something no one expected. She took the last of her emergency fund, money she'd tucked away for her own medical needs, and she hired a private investigator. A man named Mr. Henderson, who had a face like a bulldog and a mind like a steel trap. "Find out where the money is going," she told him, "and find out how they're living like royalty when they're broke." The 3 weeks while Henderson was working were the longest of Martha's life. She stopped answering David's calls. He called her twice, not to apologize for the party, but to ask for $3,000 for a surefire investment. For the first time in his life, Martha said no. The silence on the other end of the line was chilling. David didn't beg. He didn't plead. He hissed. He told his mother she was being selfish and senile. He said she was ruining his life over a silly little blanket. He threatened to stop letting her see the grandkids. That was the knife in the heart, wasn't it? Using those innocent babies as a bargaining chip. But Martha held firm. The tension was at a fever pitch. She was isolated, her son was hostile, and she was waiting for a report that she feared would break what was left of her heart. She couldn't sleep. She'd pace the floor at 2 West AM, wondering if she was the villain in her own son's story. And then Henderson delivered the folder. Oh, the skeletons that came tumbling out of David and Jessica's closet. It wasn't just living beyond their means. It was a house of cards built on a swamp. David hadn't been consulting for months. He'd been fired for irregularities. He'd been spending his days at a casino 3 states away, trying to gamble his way back into the black. But the real kicker, the thing that made Martha's blood turn to ice, was the loan application. David had forged Martha's signature on a loan application for a second mortgage on her own small, modest home. He'd used her house, the house George had worked 40 years to pay off, as collateral for his gambling debts. Land or Goshen, it was a mess, plain and simple. They weren't just taking her money, they were stealing her security, her future, and her very name. They were ready to let her be homeless so they could keep up appearances. Martha sat in her dark living room for hours, the report spread out on the coffee table. She felt a coldness she'd never known. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was a profound, crystalline clarity. She realized that by protecting David, she had been helping him dig his own grave. If she didn't stop him now, he wouldn't just ruin her. He'd end up in prison, or worse. She called a family meeting, not at their flashy house, but at her small kitchen table. When David and Jessica strutted in, they looked annoyed. They thought they were there to receive an apology and a check. Jessica didn't even sit down. She stood by the door, checking her manicure, acting like the air in Martha's house was too thin for her to breathe. "I don't have a check for you," Martha said. Her voice was steady, It didn't shake. Not even a little bit. "Then why are we here, Mom?" David snapped. "I've got a meeting with a new client. Time is money." "You have a meeting with the truth, David," Martha replied. She pushed the folder across the table. "I'll admit, when Martha first described this moment to me, a part of me wanted her to just swoop in and fix it all, again. To see their faces go pale, which they did, and for her to say, 'I'll pay it off one last time if you promise to be good.' That's the motherly instinct, isn't it? To shield your child from the fire, even if they're the ones who lit the match." But Martha knew in her heart that wouldn't be doing them any favors. If she put out this fire, they'd just start a bigger one tomorrow. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, the hardest, most gut-wrenching thing, is let your loved ones face the consequences of their own actions. As David flipped through the pages, the color drained from his face until he was the color of library paste. Jessica tried to grab the folder, screaming that the PI had fabricated everything. She called Martha a bitter old woman who was jealous of their success. "The police have a copy of the forgery evidence," Martha said quietly. "I haven't called them yet, but I will, David. I will do it to save you from yourself." David collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs, the same chair where he used to sit and eat oatmeal as a boy. He started to shake. The reality of his situation was finally crashing down. The jet skis, the wine, the consulting, it was all gone. Martha put her foot down. She gave them an ultimatum they couldn't refuse. It wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. "Sell the house," she told them. "Pay back the firm before they file formal charges, move into a 2-bedroom apartment, get jobs, real jobs. And David, you're going to rehab. I know about the scotch, and I know about the pills you've been taking to stay awake." Jessica laughed, a hysterical, high-pitched sound. "You think I'm going to live in an apartment? You think I'm going to work a 9 to 5? Then you can leave," Martha said. "But David is staying, and he's going to get well." It was tough love, for sure. The toughest. Jessica stormed out, swearing she'd divorce him and take the kids to her parents' house. David just wept. He wept like the child he had never truly stopped being. He realized he'd lost everything: his house, his reputation, and nearly his mother. Now, I know not everyone's going to agree with the way Martha handled it. Some might say she was too harsh, or that she should have tried to work things out or prey on it a little longer. But you've got to remember, this woman had poured her heart and soul, not to mention her life savings, into trying to help her family. And how did they repay her? By spitting in her face and trying to steal her roof from over her head. I'm sorry, but I don't blame Martha one bit for finally putting her foot down. The following months were like a long, slow exhale after holding your breath for a decade. There was a release of all that built-up poison. Jessica did leave. She couldn't handle the indignity of a budget. But David stayed. He hit rock bottom, and for the first time his mother wasn't there to catch him with a feather bed. She caught him with the cold, hard ground of reality. He went to rehab. He worked a construction job during the day and stocked shelves at night to pay back the money he'd borrowed from his firm's accounts. It wasn't pretty. It was grueling. He had calluses on his hands and an ache in his back. But for the first time in his adult life, David's shoulders started to straighten. The guilt that had been eating him alive, the guilt that made him lash out at his mother, was being replaced by the honest ache of a hard day's work. He found the quilt one day. He'd kept it in a box in his small apartment. He spread it out over his bed, and for the first time, he actually looked at the squares. He saw his father's shirt. He saw his own baby blanket. And he cried, not out of self-pity, but out of gratitude. Fast forward to today. David's 2 years sober now. He doesn't have a mansion, and he doesn't have a jet ski. He has a steady job at a local logistics firm and a small, clean apartment where his kids come to stay every other weekend. He sends Martha a check every month. It's for $200. It's a repayment for the forged loan and the money she spent on his lifestyle. It may not be much compared to the thousands he wasted, but you can bet those checks mean more to her than all the fancy cars and designer clothes in the world. Because now, finally, her son is taking responsibility for his actions. He's learning the value of $1, the weight of his own choices. He calls her every Sunday, not to ask for money, but to ask how her roses are growing. Last week, he even came over and fixed that leak in her roof himself. And that, my friends, is the true measure of a person. That's the release we were all waiting for, the restoration of a soul. As for Martha, well, she's reclaimed her life in the most beautiful way. She realized she didn't need that old house with all its ghosts. She sold it, paid off her debts, and moved into a lovely little cottage near the coast. It's got a porch, a rocking chair, and a view of the sunset that no amount of money could buy. No more being an ATM. She's a grandmother, a woman of substance. She spends her days volunteering at the local library and teaching young mothers how to quilt. And you better believe she's got boundaries in place to make sure she's respected this time around. She loves her son. Oh yes, but she loves herself enough now to know where she ends and his problems begin. She told me the other day, "You know, I used to think love was about saying yes. Now I know that sometimes the most loving thing you can say is no." The peace in her voice when I talk to her now, it's like a bell ringing clear and true. The storm has passed. The air is scrubbed clean, and she's finally breathing. She's not just surviving, she's thriving. She's got a group of friends she goes birdwatching with, and she's even started dating a nice widower named Arthur who treats her like a queen. This isn't a story about revenge or punishment, though it might feel like it at the start. It's a story about a mother's love, and how sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let go. It's about restoring that balance, that respect, in a family that had become so horribly lopsided. It's about the fact that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve, no matter how much you love the person who's withholding it. It's a story about the strength of a woman who was pushed to the edge and decided to fly instead of fall. Martha didn't just save her own retirement, she saved her son's life by refusing to let him live a lie any longer. So if you ask me, Martha, she's the real hero of this tale, a true matriarch, looking out for her own well-being while still caring for her kin in the only way that actually mattered. She saved David by refusing to save him. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little misty-eyed after all that. There's something so powerful about seeing a person find their strength after being pushed so far. What about you? Did this story hit you right in the heartstrings too? Have you ever had to use tough love with someone you care about? Go on, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to tell me where you're listening from. And remember, if you enjoyed this journey with me today, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It really does help the channel more than you know. That way, you'll be the first to hear the next heartwarming tale I've got lined up for you. Until then, you'll take care, keep your hearts open, but your boundaries firm, and I'll talk to you again soon.